What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and bringing another little nugget to add to the Soul Tribe archive. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the moon in Gemini in the 12th house, and this is a bit of a tricky one for the moon to be in. Now, when you talk about that good old moon, the moon is really closely tied into the body as far as like it's the things that we feel, as far as like the emotions, how we understand what happiness feels like, what sadness feels like, what anger, what joy, what nervousness, all of those frustration, all of those things. The moon is how we conceptualize that. And the moon is really kind of closely tied into just like how we were nurtured, and how we maybe learn to, how we learn how to nurture that relationship to the mother, and that just like how we understand that maternal figure or energy. And even to that relationship, even to like the home space, can be real kind of tied in, very personally with the moon there. But yeah, the moon is a very mysterious thing. It's a very one kind of a sensing the intuitive things around us as well, the lunar shenanigans. And this with the moon as well, especially if you have a night chart, we should have a relationship with the moon anyway. But the moon is really important too if you have a night chart, because that's going to be the light of the nocturnal sex. So having that relationship with that moon is very beneficial. But then you talk about Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and they are the mutable air sign, and they are active or yang in nature. And there's a strong mental energy behind Gemini, because there's this the energy, they're free flowing. The wind, the air touches everything. Gemini reminds me kind of like birds. Like how the birds are just thinking about what God's doing each day, and just like talking about creation. And it's the taking in of what's going on in the environment and the communication aspect of it. That's Gemini, and how the news, the news, what's going on out there. And I think too, there's a strong, just like again, very curiosity behind Gemini as well, very youthful energy as well with them. So, but I find that, yeah, Gemini is one that they really, I think, too, appreciate that sense of duality. They have that space to be able to see things from multiple sides there and from multiple angles. So, yeah, very powerful, powerful energy with Gemini. And then you talk about the 12th house. Now, this is probably the toughest house in ancient astrology. This was known as the house of bad spirit, and it's one of the Caden houses. And some of the themes that the 12th house deals with is like themes of loss, sickness, especially like long term sickness, kind of chronic illnesses. This could be enemies, or just like, kind of like those hidden enemies, those self deprecating things that we may say to ourselves, that doubt from time to time, confinement or isolation, troubles, toils, tribulations, things, those, any sort of those wonderful topics. So, when you're working with this placement, a few things to consider. One, you'd have a Cancer rising by whole sign, and you're going to want to look to Mercury, because Mercury is going to be responsible for this house and for your third house, which deals with like siblings, short-term travels, learning, communications, neighbors, relatives, things like that, friends. And then the moon is going to be responsible for your first house, which deals with like your health, your life, your body, and just the beginning of all actions. So one thing that I would talk about with this placement right off the bat is just really what is your sort of like relationship with your body, especially when you're going through maybe those sort of like tougher times in life, because we all go through them. When we experience those times of loss, when we go through, maybe you've been working with an illness or a sickness, or maybe this is something that you grew up working with. Maybe there was something with a sibling, or something with a family member, something with a friend, something or maybe that was something where you've experienced that sort of loss, possibly. So this would be, how do you take care of yourself through those times when you're feeling, really kind of in those feelings, and because if we don't deal with those things, remember that moon deals with the beginning of all actions, and so we're beginning things, where there is a conscious participation. Of course, there are things that are running up from beneath the scenes as well, that may be kind of driving our actions. So I think that this is, you want to pay attention to and have eyes on those periods of time. Journaling, I think, could be a very helpful thing for someone with this placement to just see what's going, because Gemini is a very busy energy, and so there may be a lot of things that are going on. There may be times where the body can maybe feel like it's a prison sometimes, where you feel like just trapped or kind of isolated in your mind or with your thoughts, or maybe if that's something that you have trouble sitting with your thoughts for long periods, just dumping that energy out. I have a Gemini moon, and I find that just like, and it doesn't have to make sense. Just write and write and write whatever comes to your mind, however it comes to your mind, just to get it out. And I find that just having this, clearing out that mental clutter, it just gets the air, because I find where that 12th house, it can feel like the air maybe gets stifled sometimes. When you're able to get that out, and just like you're able to just like think again. You're able to just dip it back into the body again, and to not feel, maybe if, especially if you notice maybe like tension. But that would be something too when you're working through maybe those things, creating like a video thing, for example. I think just to observe how you maybe work through situations, pay attention to what you're hearing. What is the dialogue that's going on in your head on a regular basis, or pay attention to, if you notice where, like, oh, when I talk about a certain topic, maybe there's like a tension that shows up. Or learn about yourself. There's a top, maybe tension that comes up, maybe I tend to avoid eye contact, or maybe there's just like, maybe there's a stutter that goes on, maybe I tend to get a little hot when I talk about this thing, whatever that is. I find that that can be very useful. But working with like a therapist, I think that would be something really beneficial too, especially if you're finding yourself having those maybe harder chapters in life, or having troubles to work with. Don't feel like you have to be by yourself, in doing these things. I think that we do have to take time to be with those things, but we can have help with someone to help us, give us the tools to be with those, be with ourselves during those times. So that could be another thing that shows up there. But I could see this too, maybe if you do happen to be someone who maybe takes care of people who are dealing with maybe any sort of like long-term illnesses, or maybe that's something you do with like in your community, or whatever that is. You just be mindful, just like again, of how much you give of yourself. I think that this one could give a lot, because wanting to get people back to just feeling good again. But yeah, just make sure that you're, again, just taking that time and recharge your batteries. Go on a trip. Have some self care days. Just some days where you're just kind of just you. Maybe a nice cup of, maybe like a nice warm beverage, and just like a nice book or your favorite show, or just some things to just kind of just feel. Get back to feeling in the temple again. Just feeling comfy and cozy in the body. So that would be another thing that I would pay attention to. And yeah, just having a regular routine just with yourself, I think would be something that could be very beneficial. Learn about different ways to take care of body, working with different herbs possibly there, working with different foods, or if you're not on any sort of like pharmaceuticals or anything like that, just a tea, for example, that especially if you dealing with maybe like kind of like that. I have my son in the 12th house, so when you're dealing with things like that, St. John's wort, that's a really lovely one. And I find like anything sort of bitter, any kind of bitter thing can help you when you feel stuck in that can help you get just right back to your body for a minute, and make those things more easy to swallow, in a sense, because it's just like, oh, it's interesting. Another thing, a book that I would recommend, Heal Your Body by Louise Hay. I think that's another one that would be, check that out. So this is kind of small book, and it just like it. I think that could be helped to have that sort of like mind body connection, really kind of tuning into yourself and the things that you're feeling. And again, having a relationship with the moon, if you're able to just get out and just, I think I talk about this usually with every Cancer rising that I come across, but Cancer placements in general, but especially in like the sun moon rising, having that relationship with the moon, tuning into the waxing and wanings of life. Because the thing I think with this combination about this house too, that I think could be potentially really nice, is where there are going to be times where we're going through hardships, where we're going through maybe loss in those periods of time, that doesn't mean that we're going to stay in that, and that tomorrow's a new day. That there is a time that you can begin whenever you're ready, that there's it's never too late to change things around, to come out from the darkness, in a sense, with those 12th house themes sometimes. So I think that let if that's any sort of like silver lining there, I think try to let that be a reminder that the moon's got your back, and the moon moves through these things, and it changes through these things with time there, and and having a good, I think, a good sense of community as well would be really nice, whether that be with your siblings or whether that be with like friends, things along those lines, your neighborhood, something like that. I think that would be very beneficial too, not just all about being in confinement, but yeah, having that strong sense of that people, that you don't feel just like, it's one thing to want to be alone, but it's another if you're lonely. So that's, I think, something too, where to just kind of pay attention to that as well there, and yeah, just have that kind of that strong structure there. Could be really beneficial for just all parties in favor. So, but yeah, those would be just some basic things that I would talk about with this placement. You definitely need the rest of the chart to talk about, to get a clear picture of this. But if you have this placement or know someone who's working with this placement, you feel comfortable sharing about how you've experienced this, how you understand this energy, down in the comment section, let us know, because it is another thing to see these stories come to life. And I find having these sort of records can just help others to, so they don't feel alone in this, so that they can feel like, oh, other people are going through this too. So that, I think, could be very beneficial. But, and that's something too, if you want to work with this placement, to this placement more, or find about any of the services that I provide. I should have everything revised by the end of the week, but I'm getting where you can book a consultation with me I'll provide the link to book a consultation. It'll send you to a calendar link. You do all the payments and everything all in just kind of one-stop shop there. And then if you have any questions about the services that I provide, my email's down there as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to me if you need any sort of clarity. And then a couple other things on this channel, and I would definitely recommend this for someone with this placement. I have a second or separate segment that I do in this channel called Lunar Shenanigans, and I have a playlist down in the description box that talks about, or at least I will, and it's for the Lunar Shenanigans. It talks about the lunar astrology, what sign it's in, what aspects it's forming, what phase it's in, when it goes void, of course, and yeah, just how to work with the general energy of the general flavor of the day and the forecast for that day. And then also too, I do one that talks about the sun and the rest of the classical planets, and just goes over what aspects are forming, what planets may be feeling this more potently, and how to work with those energies as practically as possible. So all that's available for you. That's on the Celestial News Weekly tab. So that's all I got for you there. So until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep raising that vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.